Hey everybody, this is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com. We're back with this week's new comic book reviews, and actually, it's a pretty big week this week. Quite a few books, some new stuff and some old stuff. A couple from last week. So the one thing is that sometimes I get the comics earlier than street date, and so sometimes I actually miss a few because they haven't finished checking everything all in. So that's why, like last week and then this week, there's a couple that came out last week that we'll cover this week. So they're not quite new, but they're still pretty new. So we'll still cover them. We still want to point out the good stuff to you. So first up, we've got The Monkey Prince #1. Written by Jean Luen Yang, with artwork by Bernard Chang. Now, the first Monkey Prince story actually appeared there was a DC Asian special. So that was actually the first appearance of the character. But this is really the first issue. That was kind of a short story that was a primer. So this is really the first issue that is really telling the origin of the Monkey Prince. And here's the thing. It's not a very deep story, but it's a really fun story, and that sometimes is good enough. And I think in this case, the one thing that the book really has a nice charm to it. So what it is this kid who's, he's a typical normal teenager going to school. I wouldn't say that he's bullied, but he's the outcast, and he feels different. And there's a thing in the beginning that his parents. So basically, his parents are like henchmen for like the Penguin and others. And so the book starts off with Batman breaking into the house and kind of beating his parents up. But then he finds out that actually his real dad is the Monkey King. So he's actually the Monkey Prince. And so that's kind of the setup in this first issue. And I'll give it to Yang that once again, I mean, the story's a pretty basic structure. This first issue's exposition, but it just has, there's a real charm about this story, and it's not, and I think that's what's kind of nice in a way. Yeah, I'll agree. It's like comfort food, but that's okay sometimes to actually read a book that's just kind of fun, and he definitely really puts the fun in it. And then you have Chang's artwork that really just it really adds a lot. It's really nice artwork and just really complements the story, and it's just one of those things that it really goes together really well, and I really enjoyed it. And like I said, sometimes simpler is better, and in this case, I think having something simple really made it good and a lot of fun. So I think it's worth checking out. Next up, we have Savage Spider-Man #1, written by Joe Kelly, with pencils by Geraldo Sandoval, with inks by Victor Nava and Sandoval. So now we have something on the opposite side of the spectrum. I really hate to say it. I really did not care for this. And part of the problem was there's a point where maybe something is too basic, and this book really proves how basic you can tell, or how basic of a story you can do, because Kelly has basically written a story that you could write on a napkin. So you have this mutant Spider-Man who's like half human, half Spider-Man, or half spider. And then there's this monster that comes and beats him up, and there's literally 22 pages of battle almost. And it just really, it has no point. It wasn't like so much bad, but it was like, I mean, I literally read it in like a few minutes, and I'm like, this is it? This is, this is what you're doing? And I guess so. So, on the plus side, I mean, it's a real pretty book. I mean, Sandoval's artwork's really nice, but there literally is just no story here. And honestly, there isn't even a reason to come back after the 5 minutes you spent reading with it. I don't know what really Kelly was thinking here. And like I said, it's not that it's terribly written. It's just there's nothing that's written. It's just like lots of grunts and and fighting, and that's what it is, and that's all it is. And certainly for like the four bucks that you're spending, $4 or $5 on this thing, you're just like, nope. So that's a hard pass, and I really kind of strongly advise not getting it, because it really just there's no meat on the bone there. Next up, we have Geiger 80-page giant #1 with a cornucopia of creators. We're gonna go down the list. So first off, we have Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch. Then we have Johns and Gary Frank. Then we have Johns and Paul Peltier with Tony Cordes on the artwork. Then we have a story from Peter J. Tomasi with artwork by Peter Sternberg. Then we have Sterling Gates writing with the incomparable Kelly Jones on the artwork. Then we have Leon Hendricks III writing with Stas Johnson on the artwork. Then we have Pornsak Pinshot writing with Sean Galloway on the artwork. Then we have Janet Harvey Novella writing with Megan Leaves doing the artwork. And then finally Jay Farber writing with Joe Prado doing the artwork. So what this is, first of all, there's the first story is a Redcoat story. He's a new character. I guess what he's doing is kind of creating, I don't want to say a universe, but he's creating a timeline for Geiger. And Redcoat goes back to the George Washington and the Civil War, not Civil War, the war with the British. And so that's his first story. It's basically a character that is immortal. It's fine. It's going to become a series, so we'll kind of see how that turns out. Like I said, it was a fine story, but it's more of just like a preview of the story. So, like I said, you get a taste, but I don't think there was a really much to tell just from this preview. It was nice and everything. Then there is there's also a framing story by Johns and Peltier, which kind of bookends this whole thing. The first story, the first really side story is about Barney, his two-headed dog, which is done by him and Gary Frank, who do the regular book. So it's basically Barney's origin, and it's really good. And then you get to see him as a puppy. So, what can I say? A two-headed puppy, he's adorable, and we all want one. Then we have Tales of the Unknown War, which is also going to be a spin-off book from here, and that one's by Johns and Paul Peltier. And once again, it's really a setup for the series, and it gets off to a decent start, sets things up. We'll kind of see how that one goes. So the next set of stories are roughly stories about hotels that are in the Las Vegas bubble. So the first one is the Safari by Tomasi and Sternberg, and it's really interesting because it's kind of a Hunger Games, but with like there's hunters, the rich people are hunters, and then the poor people are the huntees. So it's really an interesting story, but it's told from the point of view of the huntee or a huntee. So it's really interesting. I don't want to give away, but it was actually a really nice story with really good artwork. Oh, and I'll go back, and of course Brian Hitch's artwork on the Redcoat is really wonderful, and then Gary Frank doing the Barney story was really wonderful. The next one is my absolute favorite, partially because of the artist, but so it's called the Karloff, and that's the name of the hotel, and of course it's Universal Monsters basically. And what's really great is Gates really writes this story for Kelly Jones, in the sense of, or I don't know if he came up with the story and they said, hey, we need to get Kelly. Either way, it's a match made in heaven. It's a great horror story. It really reminded me of a story from, like, say, House of Mystery, House of Secrets, that kind of thing, because it's just perfect. And then you have Kelly Jones' artwork, which is absolutely always gorgeous. I will buy anything with Kelly Jones, and thankfully the rest of the book is good. And really this is really the icing on the cake. This was my favorite story. But a lot of it was because of Jones, but I love the story because of the homage to the Universal monsters. Uh, the Nero one is by Hendricks and Johnson. It's really interesting because it's this, the Caesar's palace sort of thing, and it's really an interesting story about how you have these rich people who run the hotels and run everything, and yet it's really a story about the regular people and their struggles. And it was a really interesting story and very bittersweet at the end. That one was a really good one. The Goldbeer story by Pinchot and Galloway is really probably for me was one of the most heartfelt stories, because it's about a father and his son going to look for a treasure, but there's a story that's really what that is about, and I don't want to give it away because it's really a nice emotional story that was really good. And I really enjoyed Galloway's artwork. He gives it like an animation style, and it really fits that story just quite beautifully. The Nelva and the Leaves is a story about Manhattan. It's about this woman who owns a casino, and instead of, like, she actually treats her employees really well, but if you screw her over, you'll pay the price. And also she likes to nurture new employees, and that's really what that story is about. Very interesting. That one was really another good story. The final story is the Saturn VII by Farber and Prado, which is really interesting because in a way it reminded me of not the Stratosphere but Bob Stupex, where he had all that stuff from, had that space 60s theme going. And it was really an interesting story. The artwork was really wonderful on that. Actually, overall, the artwork on all these stories are really good. Solid stories. I really enjoyed it, and I loved the fact that it was had short stories by other people, and it really opened up a lot of things. So hopefully they'll do more of these specials like this, because this one was really good and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and once again I go back to, I really like short stories, and these all worked really well. So that one's definitely well worth picking up, and it's a great extension of Geiger. If you haven't been reading Geiger, you should be. The trade came out this week, so check it out. It's really a surprisingly good book. Next up, we have New Masters #1 by Shobo Coker with artwork by Shof Coker. So what the premises of this is post-apocalyptic world, and there is this material that is used by, aliens kind of came over, and they're kind of running. I don't want to say they're necessarily running the earth, but they're kind of in charge. And so this material, say not like gold, but like you have to mine it. It's really hard to find. And so that's kind of the basic story, and of course the earth is a post-apocalyptic, everything's depressing. It's kind of, I think there's some interesting ideas that Shobo came up with in the story, but I think the first issue kind of misses the mark, where it just there wasn't really a big hook there. I mean, because part of the problem is that the story structure is very basic. In the sense of post-apocalyptic, trying to survive and all this kind of stuff. And there's not a hook that really makes this really stand out from things that you've read before. I will say Shof's artwork is really nice here. But overall, I think it just kind of misses the mark, where partially because it just doesn't, it doesn't expand on much of anything that you've read before, and like I said, it's kind of disappointing because I think it there's some promise there. I think there's some good ideas. It just doesn't quite pan out so well. Next up, we have X-Cellent #1, written by Peter Milligan, with artwork by Michael Allred. So this is really a sequel to their Ecstatic run, and last year, I think it was even maybe, I don't know, it was a long time ago, there was a special that was supposed to lead into this series, but then there was a huge delay in the book. I don't know what happened. But here's ultimately kind of the problem. This is not really particularly new reader friendly because it takes concepts from Ecstatic, and it also takes story, somewhat elements from that special. And if you haven't really read those, I think you'll be a little bit lost. I mean, the story itself that Milligan has written here is fine. You can kind of jump in, but I think there's just this all this backstory that goes with these characters and everything that you just kind of miss if you haven't been reading it. With that being said, if you're a big fan of Ecstatic, then you're gonna love this. I just think that it would have. I think maybe having a little bit more of a primer, maybe in the front, kind of giving a little bit more, which is, like I said, I really enjoyed the book, but I also know it. I think the problem is that you're kind of, if you're a new reader, you're kind of jumping into the middle of the story, and I think that's where that book's going to suffer a little bit, in the sense of it's not necessarily really new reader friendly. But on the flip side, if you do say it, I did enjoy the story. I think I like the concept that they're doing, how it's kind of that blending of like social media and superheroes. That to me was really interesting. And then of course, Allred's artwork is always a win. At the very least, even if you don't necessarily understand the story, you get Mike Allred artwork, which is always a win. So I think it's for new readers. I don't know that this is a really good place to start. For regular readers, yeah, definitely pick up this book. Next up, we have Space Bastard Special Delivery #1, written by Eric Peterson and Joe Aubrey, with artwork by Gabo, Boo Cook, and Simon Bisley. There's 3 stories in here. Now, this book came out last week, but we missed it last week. We're doing it this week. So the first story is the longest. That's the one with the artwork by Gabo. So what it is, it's the owner of the delivery service and the kind of weird green alien. And before I go any further, I will say that even if you haven't read Space Bastards, these are kind of standalone stories. The basic structure is you just have to know about the delivery, where the basic premise of the delivery, where it's like you can beat up and take the package from the other person, and each time the price goes up. That's the basic structure of the Space Bastards premise here. So the first story, which is actually really funny, it's the casino, or the delivery guy who owns the company, and then the green guy. They end up in this basically religious cult where they are offered, they're going to start a new race, and they're the only men left, and except for they can't perform. And I don't want to give any more away, but there's really a great, not only is there a twist to that, but then they end up doing a delivery, and basically all hell breaks loose. So you have the one thing I've always loved about Space Bastards is it's like Spinal Tap. They turn it up to 11 with every story they write. And it's really, this first story is just so wild and insane, but it really sums up what has been great about Space Bastards. Then the second story, which is drawn by Boo Cook, is very interesting because it's kind of that story of the mousy guy who goes on a date with a really good looking girl, and it does not go well, but not in the way you think. And it really is, it's really kind of sad. I mean, I loved it and everything. And oh, I must go back. I really have to, Gabbo's artwork on that first story is just absolutely fabulous. I really love the artwork. There's some really gorgeous stuff there. So in the second story, Boo Hook, really, I like the artwork. He really fit that emotional, kind of depressing visual of the story. The final story is drawn by Simon Bisley, and once again, it's kind of like the first story, except for it's just chaos. And I think my favorite thing about that is, beyond it's nice to always see Simon Bisley artwork, but the fact that there's the three guys chasing kind of the bad guy of the story. They're completely naked, but he finds a way to cover the nudity in so many amazing ways throughout that chase scene that it's really just wild. And if you haven't picked up Space Bastards, I really enjoyed this series. There is a trade of it that has come out, but this is actually another, I think this is a good start. This definitely gives you a flavor of what that series is like. And I also like the fact that the stories weren't just all very similar. I mean, the like the first one, it just has a great flow to it. It's and then the second one being emotional, and then the third one just kind of a more of a comedy in a way. And they all just work well. And I like I said, I've been a big fan of the book, and I really enjoyed this special that they came out with. So I think it's worth checking out, especially if, once again, I think it is a good primer for the regular book. Next up, we have the official Image timeline #1. So this is not really a comic. What it is, it's basically an encyclopedia version, visual encyclopedia of the history of Image Comics. It starts at the beginning, and they show every book that they've ever put out from the start up to the most recent. I think January. It would have January's books in it. So there's some interesting things in there, but ultimately, I think for the problem I have with it, it's really great, but at $8, there's really nothing here that you can't find yourself. I mean, it's a well put together book in that respect, but there's kind of no real behind the scenes. There's no real commentary beyond very basic, here's what this book is about. We did Gru, and Sergio Agronis is great, but there's not really much behind the scenes that you really would learn. I mean, there's a few things, but ultimately, I don't think there's anything that you couldn't find, say, with some research on your own on the internet. There's not any particular anecdotes about things. I mean, there is an opening letter by Jim Valentino, and that's really nice, and there's a thing by a foreword by Eric Stevens, and there's a nice checklist of awards that they've won and things like that. It's nice, but ultimately it was very basic, and I just felt, being that it's kind of a historical sort of thing, that there's just not really anything beyond what you could find yourself. So in that respect, I found it pretty disappointing that there wasn't more. I was really hoping that, hey, here's a story of this and why we did this and did that. And there really wasn't a lot of that. It was very, very on the surface. That's kind of, I think, the best way to explain it. Next up, we have X-Men Legends #11, written by Louise Simonson, with artwork by Walt Simonson. So this is a New Mutant story, and once again, the X-Men Legends sort of take place in between certain issues of the comic. And once again, I don't think you have to have really read those comics. And first and foremost, this is definitely worth for me checking out because of Walt Simonson's artwork. I love Walt Simonson; he's a great artist. But this kind of had the same problem of their X Factor story, and the fact that it's Louise writes a decent story, but I think there's just not. It's really there's not. It doesn't really have a nostalgia to it in a way. It's a nice story and everything, but it just doesn't. It doesn't really grab you or anything. It's like, okay, this is like the middle issue of this story, or there was the 2-issue story, and this little side story fits in between that, and that's all nice and everything, but it really just it doesn't for me it didn't really bring back nostalgia beyond Walt's artwork. Walt doing the X-Men, because he did some issues of X Factor, and it just like I want to like it more than I did. I don't think it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's okay. It was just more like I want. Look, if you're peddling nostalgia, I want nostalgia, and it isn't quite nostalgic enough, I think. Next up, we have One Star Squadron number 3, written by Mark Russell, with artwork by Steve Lieber. So this, first and foremost, I've said it many times before, Mark Russell's an amazing writer. And the thing that I'm really loving about this is the first 2 issues have kind of set it up where it looks like Red Tornado is failing the job of being manager of this. Of basically Ren of superhero. That's the really the best way to sum this up. And yet that is what is making this book really interesting, is that it's kind of social commentary about corporate America and how this whole thing is just set up to make money. Really, it's not about helping people or whatever. And you see that in this issue where there's Jack Lantern. Basically, there's a boat that has capsized and people are in the water, and he gets a call that basically, hey, forget those people. You've got a Halloween party to go to. And so you're like, he literally leaves those people, and you're just like, oh my God, what is... And that's just a small part of what is really been amazing about this book. And we're only 3 issues in. We got 3 more issues. And I like how this issue, the first 2 issues really set up this issue where it's not so much that Russell's trying to twist. It's more of like, you don't expect what happens in this issue. And that's what is making this book just really amazing. And then I really love Lieber's artwork. He's really fantastic. He was the artist on the Jimmy Olsen book that was really just amazing. And this is like a match. These guys are perfect together. I mean, great story and great art. This is a must-read book. I'm really enjoying the hell out of this book. Next up, we have Echolands number 6, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Hayden Blackman, with artwork by J.H. Williams III. So once again, I continue. I think this is one of those stories that, like, it doesn't necessarily, it's not translating well as a monthly, in the sense of it's a whole story, but we're only kind of getting to see each month. We're only kind of getting a small part, and it's one of those. It's kind of very epic in nature as far as the storytelling goes, and it's just really tough to have to, you read these little small bites that are amazing, but then you have to wait a month for the next issue. And I think it kind of loses the impact of the story in that respect. Now, with that being said, I still am really enjoying this, and there is a really amazing epic quality to this. Partially, a lot of it, yes, it has to do with Williams's artwork, but it's also the way it's presented, how it's sideways, and how the art really is driving this epic story that Blackman and Williams is writing. And I am very much enjoying it, but I will say, I think there's definitely going to be, I think for a lot of people, it's going to work a lot better reading it in one shot. So I still recommend the book, but it's one of those things. I think for a lot of people, it might be worth the wait till it's the whole story's collected in one shot. But it's still a great book, and visually it's just absolutely stunning. It's probably one of the best looking books on the racks right now. Next up we have Arkham City: The Order of the New World, number 5, written by Dan Waters, with artwork by Danny. So we're in the next to the last issue on this, and so things. So we have the doctor who is trying to figure out how Arkham has really that Gotham City is actually the Arkham Asylum, and that Ten Eyes has figured out the layout of Gotham is Arkham, or is really what Arkham is. And so we have most of the quote unquote villains have been there in the hospital. So Arkham as a ghost actually releases them. So we're really coming to where this is all coming together, where the ghost of Arkham is actually real. And he's really kind of brought this team of villains and the psychiatrist together. And Azrael is flying around. He kind of gets his butt kicked this issue. But it's really interesting, and it really I have to give it to Walters that this story has been really quite amazing and quite a surprise. I think it's been one of the better things that have kind of came out of like these side Batman books in quite a while, in the sense of it's not, the Joker, it's not another like Robin book or whatever. It's really something unusual, and I really, really enjoy it. And then the artwork by Danny is just absolutely incredible. She really captures the grittiness of the story, and it's just absolutely gorgeous book. I'm really enjoying this, and if you've missed the first few issues, like I said, it's the 6th issue is gonna be the last one. I know they'll collect it. It's really worth checking out. I've really enjoyed it. I'm really can't wait to see how they bring it across the finish line. Next up, we have Fantastic Four Life Story, number 6, written by Mark Russell, with artwork by Sean Isaacs, with Z Carlos and Angel Unzita helping out on the artwork. I think that could be one of the reasons why this last issue, the last couple issues have been kind of on the late side, but I will say it was well worth the wait. So each issue has covered a different decade. This one covers the tens, so it would be 2010. So we now have a much older Fantastic Four. There's been so in a lot of ways this is like an Elseworld / What If story, but not in the way that those are done. It's because usually it's like I think it leans more towards the Elseworld theory of this is a different telling of the life story of the Fantastic Four. And I think that is a much better approach than, what if the Fantastic Four was actually the X-Men? And what Russell has done here is he's really found a way to capture the Fantastic Four in a way that is very down to earth, and I think very relatable, in the fact that deep down they're superheroes, and yes, they have these superpowers, but in a way they still have the same problems and thoughts that we all have. That yes, their problems are different, but they still have problems just like we have problems. They have ups and downs like we have. They have good days and bad days like we have. And I think that is what Russell has really captured in this story. And really it's about them as characters over them being superheroes. And that is why this book has been really amazing. I've really loved it. Russell's really done a bang up job on this. I've really enjoyed it. And I have to give it to Isaacs. The artwork's really nice, even with the two other artists assist. They get across the finish line. It's a good looking book. And they really, it wraps up just beautifully. It has a really sweet ending, and I really, really enjoyed this book. It's really highly recommend it. If you've missed it, I know the trade will be out soon. Definitely check this book out. It was, especially if you're a fan of Fantastic Four, I think this has been one of the best Fantastic Four stories I've read in quite a while. Next up, we have Nocterra number 7, written by Scott Snyder with artwork by Tony S. Daniel. So they as with a lot of Image books, they took a bit of a hiatus. So this is back. The first 6 issues was the first story arc. So now we're on to the second story arc. But once again, not a particularly good jumping on point for new readers, but there is a trade of the first 6 issues, so that you can get caught up and then jump right into this 7th issue, because this definitely the story starts from the events that have happened in the 6th issue. So now we have them. They have this new goal of trying to find out why things have been going. Is there actually a cure for this darkness? And now they found out that they can cure people that have been affected by the darkness, because they did save her brother. So now they have to figure out what's going on with this other stuff, because now secrets have been revealed and now we have more secrets. So that's kind of I'm trying not to give too much away, but this issue is, once again, it's continuing part of a storyline, and I really am. This has been a surprisingly good book. I really have to give it to Snyder that he's come up with a really interesting hook for this book, and not so much. Once again, it's not so much that it's that original. He's just telling a good story. And I've always said, you don't have to be original, just tell the story well, and that's what he's doing here. Then you have Daniel's artwork, which continues to just make this book just look amazing. This is a really great looking book, and I also love how the twists and turns of the story. It's really been a really big surprise. I really have to say, I've really surprisingly enjoyed this book. Next up, we have Black Hammer Reborn number 8, written by Jeff Lemire, with artwork by Malachi Ward and Matthew Sheehan. So this book came out last week. We're doing a little catch up again. So on this one. So this one centers around Wonky and Captain Weird, and how the story of like the past and the present and everything is coming together. And the fact that this is really leading up to not only what has happened, what is going to happen, and what may or may not happen. I know that's very vague. It's really hard to explain. So in a way, this is almost, the way to describe this story is Colonel Weird is like almost going through a Groundhog's Day, where he's seeing the same thing over and over. But unlike Groundhog's Day, it's not the same. It seems similar, but it's very different. And that's where Lemire's really has opened up this story, that there is more than what has appeared to be. And I know that sounds vague, and I really don't want to give anything away, but it really just, this issue really just opened the door to like the final run of this last chapter of this particular mini series is going to go. And it also opens up what we know about the Black Hammer universe and where it might go from here. So it's really, this issue was really spectacular, and Ward and Sheehan's artwork continues to really just be great in this book. Once again, I cannot recommend Black Hammer books enough. This is really good work, and Lemire's just knocking it out of the park. Next up, we have Dark Knights of Steel number 4, written by Tom Taylor with artwork by Bengal. So this issue, I don't know if Bengal's coming onto the book regular or if he's just doing a fill-in issue, but I'm a big fan of his artwork, so I was happy to see it. So this issue centers on the origin of Bruce, who is actually the son of Jor-El. And so Alfred actually tells him the story. So what has been interesting in a way, so what Taylor is doing here, he's telling the origin of Batman, but in a way in this medieval time. So it's interesting how you once again the story, and this is what has been interesting about the Dark Knights of Steel is he's taking these characters and telling their stories in a different way. Like it's still Supergirl, but it's a different way of telling this story about Supergirl. Same with Superman, his parents, and all this. This issue was really just amazing because one, it's like we all know Batman's origin, but this is a different way of telling it. It really is distinctively different. Plus, we get to see the Joker, and it's not, and I am certainly not going to reveal anything because it's a big spoiler, but it's really amazing, and I was very impressed with how Taylor introduced that character in this story. Then, of course, I go back to Bingle doing the artwork. I've been a huge fan of his artwork, and he really this was a really gorgeous issue. It really is. And if he stays on the book, that'd be great. If he doesn't, the artwork has been stellar on this book so far. So, but like I said, this was a really good issue. I really enjoyed it. I've been very surprised by this book. Really worth checking out. And finally, this week we have crossover number 11, written by Donny Cates with artwork by Jeff Shaw. So each issue of this, every issue he does this thing. You're just like, you're reading the story, and then he's like, the last panel is like, bam, in your face. Here, look who just showed up. Once again, I'm not going to say who showed up in the last panel, but you're going to say, oh crap. So we still have Donny Cates, he's in the comic. They found out that he wrote the script for crossover, yet he says he's never finished it. So he's in prison. Everybody's in prison at this point. And so like I said, we are learning more about this story. So it's what Cates is doing here. He's kind of bending comic reality, where he's throwing reality into this comic world and then just throwing it in a blender and mixing it all up. And of course that goes for because once again, the Powers characters are in this issue again. And he really, like each issue, the only thing I can say that I don't want to say it's even I dislike about the book, the fact that I have to wait 30 days for yet another chapter of this book. Every issue is like, you just read it and you just like eat it all up, and then you're just like, oh crap, I gotta wait 30 days for the next one. But it's really, I have to admit, he does this thing where he shocks you every issue, and I'm like, I'm okay with that because he's really having a lot of fun playing with other characters from independent creators, and it's been really a wild ride, and each issue just keeps getting better and better. And as always, Shaw's artwork is really wonderful in the book. He's just really, he does a great job of drawing all these different characters, and I love it. Because like when he draws the power characters, they kind of look like the Michael Oeming's artwork, but yet it's very much just Shaw. But he keeps it. He definitely keeps the characters in. They look similar to their original artist interpretations, but they're definitely it's Shaw, and that really shows how good of an artist he really is. So once again, I'm really enjoying this book. You should really be checking it out. And that is going to do it this week. I think we got through pretty good. Not too bad. A little longer than I'd hoped, but hey, sometimes you just have to talk about the book. I want you to point out what's good and maybe what wasn't so good. Most everything was pretty decent. There was only a couple clunkers in the bunch, but nothing too horrible. And as always, public service announcement: I buy all my comics at Pulp Fiction Comics in Long Beach, California. Ryan runs a great store. Annie and Eduardo, great. They offer discounts on the pull service. They offer 30% off of graphic novels and trades. It's a really great store. They run a great store and great community too. They have a wonderful Facebook group. Definitely check that out. It's a lot of fun. There is a sister store in Culver City, Pulp Fiction Culver City, run by Chris and her team. Another great LA comic book store. They offer discounts similar to Ryan. They're separate stores, same name, separate stores, separate owners, but both good stores. If you live in the LA area, I highly recommend checking out. And no matter where you live, please support your local comic shops. Really important. Much more than don't support Amazon Comics. As far as that, support your local comic shop. And as always, please get vaccinated. Wear your mask, social distance. We seem to be getting a little better, but with the we're still, it's still a little rough out there. Just be safe, take care of yourself, and as always, we end our show with please be kind. Kindness is free. Kindness doesn't cost anything, and kindness, it makes you and will make other people feel better. So that's going to do it. Take care of yourselves. Once again, support your local comic shops, be kind, and that's going to do it for this week. We'll be back next week with more comic reviews. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, please, and share. Take care of yourselves, and this is Steven from Pop Culture Maven signing out. Thanks. Bye.